Hey, what's going on, everyone? How you guys doing today? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is 3 Buck Theater, and Star Wars Episode 9 is just a couple months away. And one of the interesting things that's going to happen as we get closer and closer and closer to this film coming out, to the culmination of the Skywalker Saga, is going to be a bit, in my opinion, probably a little bit of apologetics for Episode 8, right? A little bit of either dismissing Episode 8 or outright apologizing for how it treated the core characters, for how it was just an abhorrent mess of a narrative structure. I mean, there's a lot you could do as people promoting Star Wars, like Lucasfilm publicity, as a way to really kind of let the audience know you made a mistake. And I don't think it's out of the question to do. I really don't think it's that out of the question to do. JJ Abrams, on the other hand, though, is not going to come right out and throw his friend under the bus or his previous director under the bus, but he did come out and say that Episode 8 didn't really derail anything, which is really fascinating when you think of it from just the perspective of what Episode 8 did and everything that it did, good and bad, mostly bad, and how it didn't really derail Episode 9. According to what JJ Abrams is doing. Now, it says here that Abrams spoke with Entertainment Tonight Canada, and he says that the story we're telling, the story that we started to conceive when we did The Force Awakens, was allowed to continue. Episode 8 didn't really derail anything we were thinking about. Going on to say, but I will say that the fun of this movie is that the characters are all together on this adventure of a group. That's the thing I was most excited about, to see the dynamic between these characters that these amazing actors play on. Desperate seat of your pants adventure. To me, that was the thing that was the most fun, having the group together. And that was one of the biggest complaints with Episode 8, was that Rey and Finn, who spent the majority of Episode 7 together, were only together very briefly at the end of Episode 8. And it was something that a lot of people kind of caught on to. And JJ here even goes on to talk to Vanity Fair, where he was taking a different approach. He explains it a little bit. He says, working on 9, I found myself approaching it slightly differently, which is to say that on 7, I felt beholden to Star Wars in a way that was interesting. I was doing what, to the best of my ability, I felt Star Wars should be. And the reason why I think that's interesting is because in Episode 7, in The Force Awakens, JJ had to reintroduce us to Star Wars. And people might be thinking that's a little bit weird to say, but think about it like this. Return of the Jedi, 1983, Force Awakens, 2015. 32 years later, we're back in this world, and it almost feels like it's like 32 years in the future from Return of the Jedi, which I believe that it was. So think about it like that. He had to reintroduce us to that world 30 years later. A lot of us go back 10 years previous to that, to Revenge of the Sith. But Revenge of the Sith and the prequel trilogy looked nothing like the original trilogy. So he had to continue off of that. And as many events in Star Wars that are cyclical, it makes sense. It makes sense why they did what they did with The Force Awakens in regards to easing us in. I would have done it a little bit differently, but I do understand why he did what he did, and I don't really hold it against him. The thing here, though, is now when it comes to Episode 9, he says, it felt slightly more renegade. It felt slightly more, fuck it, I'm going to go and do the thing that feels right, because it does, not because it adheres to something. And when you are looking at a movie series like Star Wars, and you go into this new film, this new trilogy, it almost feels like it is beholden to something. It's beholden to the past, which is what him and Lawrence Kasdan attempted to do, and that was met with quite a bit of criticism. Then Rian Johnson comes out and subverts expectations with the Rise of Skywalker, with The Last Jedi, and it really kind of went the other direction. People were like, whoa, man, that's not good. And here he says, look, what happened in that movie didn't derail what our original story was. Now, I really want to know what that means. I want the details on that. Obviously, we're going to figure that out when we see the movie. He did say that all of our questions will be answered. A lot of people have come back with, I've seen the last season of Lost, F you, JJ, just to kind of put it out there. That was more Damon Lindelof than it was JJ Abrams at that point, because Lindelof and Carlton Cuse were the showrunners and the exec producers on the show. JJ was kind of in name only at that point because he was so busy with other things that I think he was doing Star Trek Into Darkness at the time. So really a lot of that was Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse, but people like to put the blame on JJ because it just seems easier to do so. No. Blame Lindelof. Blame Lindelof for everything. That's okay. That's okay to do. Prometheus, Alien Covenant, That's okay to do. We can blame Lindelof. It's fine. No one in Hollywood is going to be mad at you for doing that. But I do think that JJ is taking a different approach here. I think he's going back to what he felt made Force Awakens good, which was the characters and the story and them on this adventure together, which is one of the reasons why we're seeing them together. Yeah, in Return of the Jedi, Luke separated from everybody and went to go face Vader alone, but the rest of the crew went down to Endor to complete the mission together. These characters need to be together. One of the things that Daisy Ridley had said was that she was so excited that her and John Boyega got to spend a lot of time together because they weren't really together on the last movie at all, and she commented on that. If you go back and you look at a lot of the things that the cast has said about The Last Jedi, none of it's really like that great. I mean, it's like passable here and there, but if you really read between the lines, you can see specifically why people are upset at Rian Johnson. And the fact that JJ is kind of coming out now and saying it didn't derail anything, i.e. it didn't matter. Now, I don't know what that means specifically. Was Luke always intended to die in the second movie? Or is he really dead? Did he just force teleport somewhere? We don't know. We don't know until we see it. We have no freaking idea. But it does feel like JJ is doing, instead of attacking Rian Johnson and throwing him under the bus, he's kind of like covertly, subtly saying it none of that mattered. Think of it like this. Die Hard trilogy, for example. Die Hard 1, Nakatomi Plaza, Hans Gruber, John McClane, great movie. Die Hard 2, directed by Rennie Harlin, not John McTiernan. Yeah, it kind of loosely follows as a sequel to number 1 with the whole relationship between Holly and John and John being a detective in LA now versus New York. But then a couple of years later, John McTiernan comes back, and then you got Die Hard with a Vengeance, which takes place as more or less a direct sequel to Die Hard. Indiana Jones is very similar in that front, right? Indiana Jones fights Nazis. Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom. He ends up taking on the Tuggy cult, and it was actually a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark. Then in The Last Crusade, he fights the Nazis again. So the original villains are going to come back. The second movie becomes more of a bit of a side story. I don't think people are going to want to see that in regards to this, because in the previous two trilogies, the middle movie was kind of like the good guys lose at the end of that one, which kind of happened here, but not in a way where you felt like you really wanted to see what happened next. Like you really wanted to know where things were going to go. The Last Jedi ended and you're like, oh, hey, look, there's a kid with a broom. Right? Like you don't care. You don't care at all about that. You're like, oh, he's a slave boy who's got force powers. Why didn't they rescue him? Those kind of things. So that's how I view this. I view this as JJ Abrams coming out and saying like, it doesn't matter. And that gives me a bit more hope. As I said, I've been cautiously optimistic with Star Wars as of late. You might agree, you might disagree. There's been a couple channels out there that are much larger than mine that won't refer to me by name, but for some reason make direct responses to the shit that I have to say, which I think is extremely funny. That they won't actually talk to me directly about it, but they got to respond when I only get a couple thousand views a video and they get a lot more and everything else that they do. But YouTube is funny that way. However, I am curious to know your thoughts and your opinions. Be sure to head over to facebook.com/groups/3buck theater to let me know your thoughts. Or if you want to talk to me live and like you want to come yell at me live about our disagreements, by all means, you can call into Hollywood After Dark, which airs 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Monday through Thursday. And as always, I greatly appreciate you guys being here. Have yourself a fantastic day and peace out.